This is Evolutionary Radio. This is your host, Trevor Kouritzin. We've recorded over 200 awesome episodes. If you'd like to listen to past episodes, you can go to evolutionary.org/podcast. Steve, do you want to do the honors of introducing today's guest?
Yeah, we have another really smart guy, Dave Tate. You probably have seen a lot of his writings and stuff on the internet. Dave, how you doing, buddy?
Great. How you guys doing?
Couldn't be better. So Dave, you've got a very interesting background. The first thing I want you to get into is that a lot of people probably don't know this. You actually did bodybuilding for a couple of years. Yeah. So talk to us about your background, your powerlifting background, your bodybuilding background, and how this all started for you. What got you interested in lifting weights in the first place?
A troubled kid. I guess that would be the first way to describe that is, I was a kid that used to get beat up all the time, special ed kid, and so forth. And then my uncle bought me a weight set for Christmas. I think I was probably 12 at the time. And they were the old cement plates, plastic and cement kind of things. And I would spend 3 or 4 hours training every day in the basement. And my dad noticed that I had a passion for that. And it was something that I continuously, stuck to. So he was friends with another guy in town who was the chief of narcotics that was a member of Finley Barbell Club. So at 13 years of age, I was introduced or put into a private powerlifting gym, which at the time I didn't even know what powerlifting was. I was a wrestler that sucked, a football player that wasn't that good, and basically an athlete that wasn't that good of an athlete. And then when I was introduced to powerlifting, it was probably 4 months, and they had me in my first meet, and I loved it. I sucked, but I loved it, and it was the powerlifting wasn't run the same way it is now, where now everything's run in flights, where you say you take your attempt, then everybody else takes their attempt, and then it comes back to you again. So that would be a flight. Back then it was kind of round robin. So they started the weight at a certain amount and the weight never went back down. So since I sucked and I was, I remember the first meet, I think my opener squat was 350. And then I had to follow myself at 375 and then follow myself at 400. And then the next lifter, who was a female, went at 485. And then it went up from there. So I knew at that point that this is a sport I need to get involved in, because if I'm getting my ass kicked, absolutely destroyed by women, then I can only get better. I can't get worse. And I kind of knew that with other sports I was involved in, but it just didn't pan out that way with those sports. So competitive powerlifting became, part of my sporting life, athletic life, I guess you should say. And it made me a better wrestler. And it definitely made me a better football player as well. So it carried over and it changed my life. So it changed everything about me. So I went from the kid that used to get fucked with all the time to the kid nobody wanted to fuck with. So by the time I finished high school, I had a 700 squat, 500 bench, and a 640 deadlift at around 242. And then went to college, kind of bumped around to a few different universities before I figured out what I really wanted to do. And I had a hard time finding a powerlifting crew to train with. It's easy to train by yourself for powerlifting, but I was introduced to the sport, and pretty much my whole life in powerlifting has always been with a crew of guys. So it's a technical sport. So I always like to have those eyes on me from that technical standpoint. So it just so happened that my roommate at the time was training for the Mr. Ohio, and the gym I came from, man, it was a small 400 square foot gym in a really small town. I mean, we had like a lat pull down machine, squat racks, deadlift platforms. There was no other machine in there that I could think of. It was all just barbells, dumbbells, and benches. And so I was kind of intrigued with the bodybuilding thing because I was reading Muscle and Fitness and all that stupid shit too, but I never wanted to do any of it because it wasn't in the gym for one thing. And I really didn't care what I looked like. I just cared how strong I was. Now that I was in more of a, still private gyms, but more commercial gyms, it's like, wow, you know, what are all these machines? You know, I need to do this shit, you know, because it opened like a whole nother world of holy shit, you know, it's how do you know, it's just to try it and to do it. So I did compete in bodybuilding and did 3 total shows. I hated it. I loved the training. I loved the training aspect. I even liked the discipline of the diet aspect, even though back then it was nothing like, you know, in recent years where I've dieted down and, you know, it was completely different, but it was still discipline. But there was no payoff for me. You know, I'm standing on stage and it's like, this is stupid. You know, it's stupid. You know, it never had any type of impact on me, like standing up with a record squat, you know, or, you know, straining through something. And the guys I was training with at the time kind of put in my mind, well, the only reason that you're not satisfied with this whole thing is because you placed next to last. You know, you got to win, you know, to really know. And I kind of got that from powerlifting because I did compete in a couple teenage meets and I won those. And then I started competing in class 2 and below meets and then eventually open meets. And to me, you know, in powerlifting, had I not won or had early success, I probably wouldn't have liked it as much. But I also was smart enough to know that once I had that early success, I had to put myself in the bottom of the barrel. And I always did compete as an open as well, even from a teenager. For my first meet, the guys I trained with made me do that. And I think it was a way of kind of keeping you humble, but also a way of making sure you always have bigger aspirations. So I never thought I was the strongest teenager around. I never gave a shit because it was always my weight class. So I did 2 more shows and I ended up finally winning the show, and it still sucked. You know, I remember standing on stage clearly, you know, and, you know, the lights come on a little bit more and, you know, looking out into the audience, and everybody back then was wearing, you know, like T. Michael boat neck fucking sweatshirts and crazy wear, you know, funky design pants, and, you know, like 90% of the crowd was dudes. And I'm like, man, I'm up here in my underwear posing in front of a bunch of dudes wearing fucking T. Michael sweatshirts, and what is this? You know, this is nothing, you know. And to me it was, I would rather stand up with a record squat in front of 5 people, you know, than win a bodybuilding show in front of 1,000. It just didn't have that. It wasn't my thing, but I earned a lot of respect for the sport, and I love the training. This is the fucked up part. I love the training more than I like powerlifting training. And I think because there's a greater room for error, so you can kind of go off path and do a lot of stupid shit, you know, do strip sets and all that. The stuff I like to do, where when it's powerlifting, you got to be really regimented, and everything has to have a very specific purpose. Where the flip side of that, in bodybuilding, everything diet-wise has to have a specific purpose. So it's a really strange dichotomy, because in one you have a lot of leverage and a lot of freedom in the training, but almost none with the diet. And the other, you got a lot of leverage and freedom in the diet, but almost none in the training. And so during my time of bodybuilding, it was maybe 2 years, possibly 3, my body fat dropped. My lean body mass went up probably 25 pounds, and my gym lifts were freaky. You know, during that whole time, I didn't do singles on squats. I don't even think I deadlifted at all. I didn't do any kind of single on the bench press, because for bodybuilding, it didn't make any point. You know, there was no point. But I remember doing stupid shit like I would do a down set on the bench press at 315 and ask whoever was lifting me off how old they were. And then I would do however old they were. So my record was 38. Yeah, I knew better than to ask somebody that was 50. But the 30, I remember the 38-year-old dude, I was thinking he was like 30, 32, and I was like, ah, shit. But just with behind the neck press with 405 for triples, incline presses of, 455 for 5, just crazy shit compared to what I was doing when I was powerlifting. I remember squatting 700 for 15, and, my best squat powerlifting before that was 745, I believe. And so I'm thinking, holy shit, I get back into powerlifting, I should squat 985 pounds, and as soon as that last bodybuilding show, funny story with that is I was training, there was the first show in a series of 3 shows that were supposed to lead to the Ohio. I knew after that first one, that was it. So they come to pick me up to train that next morning, and I'm basically in a sugar coma, laying on the floor of my shitty apartment with ice cream containers and chips and Oreos and just bags of all kinds of shit all over the place. And my training partner kicked the empty Oreo package in my face and said, well, I guess you're done with the bodybuilding. And I said, you know what, I'll keep training with you guys until, the shows are over, but then I'm the fuck out of here. I got to go back to powerlifting. Then when I went back, 12, 16-week cycle later, I go to a meet and I couldn't even do the lifts I was doing when I was in high school. So I put on 20 pounds of lean body mass and got weaker and was madder than fuck. And at the time I was studying exercise science and nutrition, I've always been passionate about learning about these things, but that kind of set me down another road of, how is it that you can put on so much muscle mass and get so much stronger with repetitions, but not get stronger with that 1 rep, the 1 rep max, what really mattered. And that was the beginning of really talking more with Louis Simmons. Louis was a guy that was, even when I was competing as a teenager, he was always kind of at the same meets in the warm-up room. And powerlifting was real cool because the older veteran guys, they take time to help me out, and I didn't know what the fuck, I knew what I knew from the gym, which was, your knowledge is limited to the best guy in the gym or the best coach in the gym. There was no internet back then. So now you go to a meet, your knowledge gets expanded because now it's limited to who's the strongest or who's the smartest person in the meet. But it's up to you to be able to find a way to initiate conversations with that guy. And as a teenager, that was really hard, to do. But a lot of these guys like Louis Simmons, John Florio, John Black, some other people that most of the listeners are going to have no idea who they are, would come over and say, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? Do this. And Louis was one that was pretty consistent about it. So when I got in this funk, I remember him being in the warm-up room of the meet and walking over to him because he said something about me, and you got a lot bigger since I saw you last. And but I'm the same strength. I'm probably weaker. I'm like, I don't understand how the hell this happened. And then he started talking to me about, the max effort method dynamic and how muscles get strong and how, different contractile properties and so forth. And that all made sense to me because before the bodybuilding thing, I never really did any type of bodybuilding training. And I do think there can be a hybrid, for people that aren't competitors, that are looking to get big and strong. And we all know that there are bodybuilders that are super strong and there's power lifters that have a great ton of muscle, but those are usually the outliers because you're usually a product of your training. So
Dave, let's touch on that a bit because you often hear bodybuilders tell young guys, if you want to get big, you got to get strong as fuck, right? They say, focus on the big 3, get your bench up, get your squat up, get your deadlift up. Based on your experiences, do you think that's good advice to a young bodybuilder?
I think it depends upon who you're actually speaking to because to me, technique has to come before everything else. But I'm coming from, a powerlifting background to where, bad habits can be developed very soon and very early. If you're dealing with a kid that is, 5'11" and 140 pounds, they just got to get fucking bigger. It's bottom of line. Even if their technique sucks, if they get bigger and stronger, their technique will get better, because technique does increase with strength. So I don't think it's misguided information. I think that, somebody that's new to the weight room, they don't really know, they're just there to train, work out, maybe look better. They weren't thrown into a gym like I was. So here, you're going to be a power lifter, or here, you're going to be a bodybuilder. So there is a time period, and I don't know how long it is for most people, maybe 3-5 years, of kind of getting their feet wet before they really decide what they want to do. They kind of got to get over the newbie gains, and realize that, oh shit, this is going to be a little bit more difficult than I thought. But I do feel that putting a lot of emphasis on the compound movements and getting stronger is very important, because that will add the muscle and it will help with their technique. But at the same time, I'm one of the few probably that thinks that beginners should also do isolation movements, tricep kickbacks, concentration curls, things that are very, very simple for you to feel the muscle and isolate the muscle. Where, everybody makes fun of concentration curls, but, if you get your arm stuck in your leg the right way and you get it in the right position, you have no choice but to feel your bicep do that movement, and only your bicep. So you begin to understand what your body feels like under tension, because regardless of how, if they're going to go down the avenue of any competitive strength athlete, strongman, bodybuilding, powerlifting, or whatever it's going to be, I think they should be able to have enough control of the muscles to be able to flex their pecs, flex their bicep, and not like posing, but just like sitting there, contract, like you bounce your pecs and so forth. Because that muscular control is going to have great importance as you start to run into sticking points. Because if all you know how to do is to push weight, but your triceps are the limiting factor, you're not going to know how to better engage your triceps to help with the lockout. Or if you're trying to build a better physique and your lats are lagging, but you don't even know what it feels like to get a lat pump, you're not going to be able to bring your lats up, because your biceps could be doing too much of the movement and you don't even know it's happening.
What about diet? Do you think a new lifter, he should just eat as much as possible and try to put on weight, even if it's like a dirty bulk? Or do you think that they should stick with clean eating? Years
ago I would have said yes, that it doesn't really matter. But now the dirty bulk it's worse. Where even say 20 years ago, if you said, just eat everything, probably half of what they ate was still going to be decent food. You know what I'm saying? They'd be making hamburgers or, eating a ton of eggs and then having fucking waffles and syrup and all the other kind of stuff. Right now, there's so many, foods that come in wrappers and boxes that if you start to tell people just eat whatever you want, they may not eat a single food that's a real food, and that becomes a little bit of a problem. So
that's something really smart, Dave, that I never thought about, because that dirty bulking era, that was about 20 years ago.
Yes.
And people would say, dude, whatever your mom made for dinner, just eat as much of it as possible, and then 3 hours later have a second dinner with as much of it as possible. Chances are your mom was probably cooking like ground beef with pasta, maybe some like vegetable, like it was at least decent food. You know what I mean? It probably wasn't the cleanest thing ever, but at least you're gonna get some good protein.
She wasn't bringing home McDonald's and Little Caesars.
Yeah, like it's probably, maybe like ground beef and baked potatoes and maybe some salad or something. But nowadays, you can go buy those microwave or whatever craft dinner microwave helper, hamburger helper things, and you're getting zero nutrition.
Exactly. And I think that, obviously to gain weight, you have to be in a calorie surplus. But I think now that it's very possible for somebody to be in a calorie surplus but still have nutritional deficiencies, you know, because the food is all in wrappers and, you know, and boxes, you know. And I'm not saying to avoid that entirely if somebody's trying to gain weight, but they still have to have decent foods in there, because you have to have the nutrients. You know, there's, you know, macro nutrients, which are your carbohydrates, fats, proteins, you know, and then there's micro, which is the shit that's in the food, and vitamins, minerals, and all, you know, the shit they haven't even discovered yet. You know, when you go from a real food, you know, to something that's put in a box, then a wrapper, then the microwave, well, yeah, you also have a lot of ingredients in there that really haven't been discovered yet, but they're words you can't even pronounce, you know, so it's just filler bullshit. So I'm not saying it needs to be a clean bulk, because for a lot of people, especially younger people, I don't know if they can eat that much. You know, it's the volume of food. It still comes down to, I like to call it calories per bite. You know, so if, you know, somebody wants to eat ice cream, you know, to bulk up, well, how many calories are in that spoon? Well, now if you put chocolate syrup on there, you just added more calories. If you put grape nuts on there, you just added more calories. If you put caramel on there, you added more calories. You know, so you can double your calories per bite just by being aware of that. You know, and cereal the same way, pasta the same way. Any of that stuff, you can just find ways to add more calories to that.
So
yeah.
I was gonna say, so, you know, we'll get. There's a lot of questions that we have from users about diet and training. We'll definitely get to that, but tell us a little bit about Elite FTS. You've got 250,000 followers on Instagram. You got a lot of social media followers, which is unusual, you know, for someone who isn't like a millennial, you know, because the millennials, it's easy to get 250,000 followers, but someone who's a little older, you know, it's not as easy. So what's growing your popularity, and tell us what Elite FTS is for those that have never heard of it.
I founded Elite FTS 20 years ago. So this is our 20th year in business. And the reason for founding the company, to boil it all down, is it was first a Q&A. You know, so it was me answering questions because I was doing consulting on strength and conditioning at the time. And so we put a platform up that was a Q&A platform. And then through that Q&A platform, people started asking me where they could get certain products I was talking about. If it was bands, different books, and so forth. And so from that, it became, you know, hell, I'm referring all this stuff out. And at the same time, Louis Simmons wanted to get out of a lot of the accessory items that he was selling. So we kind of took over that part, and that's what spawned the store. But throughout the 20 years, just through the website, on our Q&A, which is no longer on the site because social media kind of made that obsolete. Before that all hit, we had well over 1 million questions answered throughout the Q&A. We have, I think, close to 10,000 articles that are on the site. Our site traffic can range anywhere between 2 to 3 million per month, and that's mostly content oriented. So we've been putting out, I like to say, I've been putting out free content or doing content marketing before content marketing was even a thing. And the reason for that was, as I spoke about earlier, all those guys that helped me out in warm-up rooms, all the coaches that helped me through adversity and so forth. It's just paying back for what they did for me, because I feel I owe it to them to be able to keep doing that, especially in today's world where everybody wants to charge for every little thing. You know, so they'll learn something from a website for free and then turn around, package it, and charge somebody else for it, which is bullshit. So we don't charge for content. We don't have a paywall. We don't have any of that shit. So I was probably more of a late adopter when it comes to social media, because I don't want to build Instagram followers. I want to bring people to our website, because that's where the best content is. It's Facebook. When it first came out, I was kind of the same way with that. I'm like, I don't understand why everybody's paying all this fucking money to try to get people to like their Facebook page. It's like, that's sending them away from where you want them to go. You know, I want them, you know, to come to the site and now I think we're starting to get to a point where, you know, companies can use these platforms and to pull customers, but it's still nowhere near where it needs to be for the time that a lot of people would spend on it. So I try not to spend more than an hour a day. You know, if I do a Q&A type of thing, maybe 2, because anything more than that, I can't justify the time expense compared to creating content, articles and stuff for Elite FTS. So that's basically that is, you know, Elite FTS, it's a huge content hub, but it's also a store that sells, you know, the highest quality strength equipment. We've outfitted, you know, universities, weight rooms, private gyms, all the way up to top end gyms. We won't sell a piece of equipment unless the way I like to put it, if a 1,000-pound squatter can't use it, I'm not going to sell it. Because if a 1,000-pound squatter can use it, then anybody that squats less can. I'd rather do that than make something that is specifically built for a 300-pound squatter, knowing that they're never going to squat more. So the quality stays higher, you know, that way. And our demographic is a little bit different than a lot of the demographics that you find on social media. Our demographic would be people who place training as one of their top 4 priorities in life. So the people that I have represent the company and the team and so forth all kind of fit that mold. If they're not there yet, the customer or potential customer or the demographic, then we're probably not the site for them, because you're not going to come and find a beginner's guide to a bench press or the 5 best exercises for your bicep. I don't give a fuck about that. There's a million other places that do that. When I came into business, there were a million other magazines that put out that kind of shit every single month over and over and over. But there wasn't very many people putting out the content that was geared more for those people who really give a shit about their training and then hit a sticking point. Because typically what happens is they'll train really hard for a couple of years and then get stuck, and they'll think, well, shit, what do I do now? And then they start jumping around from program to program, not making any progress or not making any gains. Or they'll start taking steroids, or they start other shit, you know, instead of learning how to get over the sticking point, which regardless of what they do, you know, they're always going to keep running into other sticking points. And that's kind of the whole point of strength training, is to learn how to overcome sticking points, because in life, those are called adversity. And if you can learn that in the gym, it carries over to life. So that's a big part of training as well.
So Dave, let's dig into that. Advanced lifter, let's say intermediate lifters going to become advanced. Why are the main reasons they're hitting sticking points?
Usually from what I see, it's technical. You know, 80% of the sticking points that I see are usually technically related. You know, the technique's just a little bit off, and if you can fix that, then the lifts will go up. This is for powerlifting. The lifts will go up. After that, you're going to deal with physical. There's a muscle weakness that if you bring that muscle up, say the lockout on the bench press, you know, their lockout sucks. So everybody's typically going to say, well, you got to pound your triceps or you got to pound your shoulders. I want to see what the hell your bar path looks like, because maybe your bench just looks like shit. And if you fix that, then you're not only going to have a stronger bench, but you're going to have a safer bench. That's usually the problem most of the time. Even when you're dealing with the advanced lifters, that muscle weakness will lead to a technical flaw. So they kind of go hand in hand. The higher up the scale you go. I love working with the people that are at the highest end, because I like figuring out how to overcome that. Because it is going to be, at that point, it's going to be very individual, very specific, and, you know, kind of takes a trained eye. But for the intermediates that are running into sticking points, powerlifting related, it's almost always technical related. Bodybuilding related, it's almost always some type of diet related issue. Almost always.
How is powerlifting doing as a sport? As right now with bodybuilding, we kind of have bodybuilding is kind of dying. You know, more people are interested in doing the classic physique, the men's physique. I think a lot of that's the Instagram gratification. You know, in order to build enough muscle, in order to have a nice bodybuilding physique, it's going to take 10 years. Whereas, you know, you can take 2 or 3 years of training, hop on some board shorts, you got enough physique to win a decent physique to win a pro card, or at least do well in competing. How about powerlifting? Have you seen the sport grow the last couple of years, or do you think it's kind of dying?
I think the serious, more competitive end is kind of dying, but the sport overall is growing. It's kind of following a little bit behind bodybuilding, you know, and has for a few decades now, because say 20 years ago, you had a lot of people that would go into the gym that trained for bodybuilding, but never had any aspiration to compete as a bodybuilder. So it's jokingly, we would call them closet bodybuilders. You know, they're pretend bodybuilders. And they've been around probably ever since, you know, 40 years or whatever it was, but you never saw that with powerlifting, ever. You know, if you saw a group of guys or a group of girls or just a group all together squatting in the corner, they were pretty much all training for a powerlifting meet. Now, over the past 10 years, and it's really been since raw powerlifting has become so popular as well, it's easier to get into the sport. So there's more recreational powerlifters, so to say, people who train like powerlifters but don't compete and probably never will. And I would say, you know, say 10, 15 years ago, that might have been 5% of the sport, or 5% of what you would consider powerlifting. Now it's probably 95%. So that turnaround. So when people ask me questions like, is powerlifting growing? I almost need to come back and say, are you asking about the perception of powerlifting, or are you asking about the actual sport? Because the actual number of competitors probably hasn't grown that much. But the number of people who are aware about powerlifting and train like powerlifters, that's probably increased anywhere between 400% and 600%.
So, you know, we want to talk about a little bit about the drug use, steroid use and stuff. You know, tell us a little bit about what powerlifters are using these days at these competitions to get as strong as possible.
You're never going to know, you know, unless you personally know one of these guys. And this is usually a topic that I don't like to get into, because I've been around and I'm a name in the sport, and I've been around for a very long time. So if I come across as being 100% pro steroid, everybody should take steroid, and one person decides to go on because of something that I said, I don't want that responsibility. I also don't want to be the person that's going to come out and say steroids aren't going to help you. You know, there's always risk and all that other stuff, because I don't want to be the person that's going to talk somebody out of it either, you know, because that's, to me, it's a personal decision that somebody has to really think about. And I know for a fact people today are not thinking about it as much as they should. They just think it's part of bodybuilding. They think it's part of weight training. You join a gym, you start taking shit. You know, you before you even think about competing or anything else. And what they're doing is they're actually doing themselves a disservice by doing that. And what I'm speaking about here is going on too soon, right? I do think that, again, it's still a personal choice, but I think that you have to have some training experience to where you've had to have these sticking points and work through the sticking points before you ever think about having that conversation with yourself. Because what's going to happen is that drug will get you past that sticking point, but there is another one waiting. And the easiest sticking points to overcome are the first ones on the road. It's just like anything in life, right? We all go through a lot of adversity in our life. Some people get hit with major shit very young, you know, but most people, the adversity gets a little harder the older that we get, you know, and you build up, you know, ways to be able to cope with it and ways to be able to overcome with that. So if you relate it back to training, If the only way you know how to overcome a sticking point is sticking a needle in your ass, then it's just going to lead to taking more and more shit, which over a period of time begins to work backwards for you. But to directly answer the question, you know, how much is somebody taking, that really depends upon how well the stuff works for them. I've known people personally, you know, over my whole competitive career that they would take ridiculously small amounts, like shit that I wouldn't even believe, like 2 cc's of test a week and 10 milligrams of D-ball. They were 5 milligram tabs at the time, and get strong as fuck. And you're like, there's no fucking way. I mean, that's like a TRT dose. There's no way. But their body just responded so freaking well to it that it was almost fucking unfair. Then I knew other people that would take boatloads of shit. I mean, 3 or 4 full syringes a day and go absolutely nowhere. So that's why I think it's so hard for people to say, you should take 2 grams a week, or you should take 1 gram a week, because everybody's body responds differently to drugs, right? I mean, look at how many people are dying from heroin because of 1 dose that's wrong, or fentanyl, or whatever that's in there. You know, so if they're on that path, they got to kind of figure it out for themselves. But unless they're getting it from, you know, a doctor or an HRT clinic, the other bit of advice I put out there is assume everything you're taking is fake.
Dave, how much do you think genetics play a role? I'm not sure if you know who Larry Wheels is, but I'm watching some of this guy's videos on YouTube, and he's in his 20s, and he's deadlifting like 800 pounds for reps. And he's just like, he's insane.
But genetics are a huge role. I mean, it plays a huge role, but the guy still works, right? He's still got to work hard, and sometime down the road, he's going to have adversity. He's probably had to overcome some of his adversity as well. And you don't know what his adversity is. I mean, that's the thing with social media sometimes. You don't know if he's had sticking points to overcome, because all you're seeing is the shit that he wants you to see. You know, he controls the narrative, you know, which is better than a magazine. So I guess, you know, in that regard, it's better. But there's always going to be those people. In bodybuilding, we've seen it pretty regular because it's had a bigger reach than powerlifting has. With powerlifting having this bigger reach now, and social media has helped because the digital footprint now for powerlifting is way bigger than what the magazine footprint was, so to say, which is going to draw in more people. So if, you know, you look at somebody like Larry, or, you know, there's a bunch of them out there right now, and you wonder, man, what if he wrestled? You know, what if he played football? You know, what if his skills were in that? He would probably be a Division I football player, you know, but he ended up in powerlifting, which is great for powerlifting because he'll raise the board across, you know, raise the bar across the board, but it's a different world today. So if you are somebody like Larry, and Ben Pollock's another one, there's a few out there that are just doing crazy shit. You don't make money powerlifting. You don't make money bodybuilding. So they get to a certain point and it's like, you know what? If I start focusing on my social media, then maybe I can create a business out of this. You know, so you almost can't blame them if they make a pivot and only focus on social media, where the meathead in me would love to see these guys throw their fucking phones away, get off social media, and just tear the sport up. But you got to be a realist and be able to look at things, you know, from every perspective. Like, well, if he did that, yeah, he'd probably be one of the all-time greatest powerlifters ever, but what's he going to get from it? You know, nothing. You know, the same way all the other all-time greats got nothing except great memories from it. So that creates another really weird aspect, you know, that I think hurts the top end of powerlifting and hurts the top end of bodybuilding, because there are other avenues that they can pivot off of to be able to create a future for themselves, which is better than what the sport can create. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does for sure. You're very deep knowledge. You're a very intelligent guy, I can tell, David. How old are you now?
50.
Okay, you're about 50.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about, you've been doing this a long time, you've been lifting since you were a teenager, like you said at the beginning. Can you give us some age numbers that people can kind of, kind of get an idea of what's going to happen? Because I'm almost 40, and I noticed probably in my mid-30s, my body started breaking down. Things start hurting more. I'm not able to go to the gym as often as I want. I have to stop myself from going to the gym some days because I'm like, you know what? I should probably have an extra rest day. Let me ask you this. What age do you think that when it comes to strength, that strength peaks and starts dropping? Because a lot of people in the gym notice the strongest guys in your gym are typically guys in their 40s, even early 50s. But there's got to be a age where really you can't improve anymore. So can you tell us what your opinion is on that? And also, can you tell us about what with body breaking down, wear and tear? If you've been lifting since you were a teenager, what age can people start expecting our bodies to start breaking down a little bit? Because we see it in pro sports, like it's very rare. I mean, Frank Gore's like 35 and he's still playing running back, but it's unheard of for a 35-year-old to still play running back in the NFL because of the ground and pound. So tell us a little bit about your opinion on age.
I think that training age is what needs to be looked at first. Like, how long have you actually been doing the activity? Or what did you do before that? So say you take a football player that starts powerlifting. Well, they still had a lot of wear and tear before they started powerlifting. But if you take somebody that really hasn't been that active sport-wise, and then they start weight training in their 30s, their wear and tear is going to happen a little bit later than what somebody who's been doing it since they were 12. So if they started training, and then it's what intent were they training with? So if they spent 10 years just kind of training like a gym bro, they probably weren't doing a lot of wear and tear. If they spent 10 years training with intent to, for a strength sport where you're training harder, the loads are harder, the wear and tear is going to be greater. I think the wear and tear is going to be greater in powerlifting than it will be in bodybuilding because the movement pattern is so repetitious. Bodybuilders don't have to squat every single week, or the variations, the leg train. There's a lot of different movement patterns a bodybuilder trains in, where a powerlifter is basically just training in a sagittal plane. But I've seen Louis Simmons squat 920 at 52. Donnie Thompson broke the all-time world record at 3,000 pounds. And he was in his 40s, like 44. But I can say they're outliers. From what I've seen, if somebody's training with intent, usually they start to get in their 40s. Recovery is going to start to be an issue. Wear and tear is going to start to be an issue. But the thing with wear and tear is a lot of that has to, I retired because my shoulder needs replaced. And I've also had both hips replaced now. But see, I didn't know that I had a genetic predisposition for this because at that time, my parents didn't have their shit replaced. It wasn't until I was 40 that my mom had to have her back fused and both hips replaced and my dad's shoulder replaced. I mean, between both of them, there's like 10 fucking replacements. Then it's like, oh shit. I got a strong genetic predisposition for arthritis. I'm fucked, but you know what? I'm already in it now, and I'm already kind of fucked up. So let's run it as long as we can. The question is, if somebody's passionate about what they're doing, and there's purpose behind what they're doing, they're going to keep doing it. They're going to find a way to keep doing it. So it's how can you do it in the safest manner possible for the longest time possible? Because I had to leave the sport because I can't hold a bar anymore. That wasn't my terms. So anybody I'm working with, I want them to leave the sport on their own terms. The tricky thing with bodybuilding, powerlifting, strongman, and strength sports is, and this is not a slam on the division at all, but the fucking masters divisions. It's, in the NFL, if you make it to, let's just say football, right? You play football and you're a decent high school football player, but you're not good enough to play college. Guess what? You're not playing football after high school. You're fucking done. You're retired. If you're good enough to get a scholarship or good enough to play at the next level, you'll play for another 4 years. But if you're not good enough for the NFL, you're done. You know, if you make it to the NFL, you might last 2 years, 3 years, maybe 10 years, but somebody else is telling you you're done. Now, when you're a bodybuilder or a powerlifter and you're competing in all these different divisions, you know, say you avoid the open division, which I don't like, by the way. But if you're in the open division, you always kind of know where you're ranked. As soon as people start slipping in the open division, or if they never enter the open division, they're always placing, well, they're always placing first, but in powerlifting, there's so many fucking divisions, you're going to place first no matter what you do anyhow. So there's no, the sport or the strength sports don't have a predetermined exit plan to basically get rid of lifters. And that's probably a good thing because there's not that many, you know, to begin with. But to fall back on what I think the listeners are going to want to know is for yourself, you're starting to break down. You know, what are the things that you can do to try to extend that a little bit? Typically adding a little bit more warm up in than what you would normally do would be a really good idea. You know, longer rest periods, you know, and not longer rest periods, but longer frequency times. So if you squat once a week, maybe you got to squat once every 2 weeks, and you'll actually squat better every 2 weeks than if you did every week. You know, so, and this works as I work with lifters, you know, I don't charge lifters. I got a gym here in our warehouse, but I do work with lifters on the higher end. And the younger they are, I have to increase the frequency. You know, they, not because it's just fun for them. That's what they need to progress. The older they are, I have to decrease the frequency. So it's a weird dynamic, but you really can't put an age on it and say when you're 40, you're fucked, because there's always people to prove them wrong. But I will tell people that, you know, if it's going to motivate them, like if it would motivate you, if I told you, look, at 40, you're fucked. You can't get lean. You can't get bigger. And if I know you personally and you're going to think, fuck you, and then you go do it, well, then I'll say it. But I mean, we all age, you know what I'm saying? And it's just finding a way to deal with it.
Dave, can you give our listeners some golden nuggets on ways to improve recovery? I mean, you hear all the time things like hot, cold showers, ice baths, cryotherapy. Have you found any of those to be really effective?
Yes, I think right now the best thing they could do is to do nothing. I think there needs to be an overcorrection. When I was towards the latter end of my career, a powerlifting career, I really had to focus on recovery. And Mel Siff was still alive at the time. He's the one that authored Super Training and probably one of the greatest minds in strength and conditioning that's ever lived. I used to do seminars with him. And we spoke one night we probably stayed up all night just talking about different recovery modalities and how I could implement them. And while there were a lot of really cool things, hot, cold contrast, you know, specific protocols and all this other kind of stuff, the one thing that he told me that stood out more than anything else is just like training, your body will recover or will adapt to the recovery modality. So if you always use the recovery modality, it will cease to work. All right. So that's where, you know, if it's, say it's a lifter that I'm working with and they're starting to have issues with recovery, that's when I would say, all right, let's look at, you know, intra-nutrition, because I do think that has an effect. And let's introduce hot, cold contrast. Now, if they introduce that shit too soon, like people think it's going to help them gain faster, then when they really need it, it's not going to work for them. And then once the meet's over, or once the training cycle's over, or the phase, or whatever you want to call it's over, you know, deload, you know, back off a little bit, get rid of all the recovery modalities and let your body learn how to recover without that shit so it can be used again. And then over the period of an off season, or if it's just a recreational lifter, I think they should have serious times and less serious times. During the less serious times, experiment with different shit, you know, then try, you know, grass in or hot, cold contrast, or, you know, massage, and try all the different things and see what really works. And then the ones that seem to work really well, you know, file that away and call it gold, and don't ever use it again until you're in a real serious phase of training and you start to get to a point where recovery is an issue, then start pulling out of the gold box. You know, for some people, for me, chiropractic was always freaking amazing. So I will avoid it at all costs unless I'm in a serious training phase. Then I have issues with my back or issues recovering, then I throw it in. That way I don't adapt to it.
What I find fascinating is if we ask this question to any other of our podcast guests, they probably list off like 10 supplements, take this vitamin, take this mineral. But then you have to think about it in the wild. And if an animal is hurting, what do? The animal rests. It doesn't eat. It just stays in the same place and recovers itself and repairs itself that way. It doesn't go and start eating, stuff off the ground. Oh, I got to get minerals. Oh, I got to get vitamins.
The other thing it does is limp around. So an injured animal does not spend a lot of time in rest mode. They will, shoot a deer in the leg. It's gonna find a way to limp around. A dog has, a hurt leg, it's gonna find a way to keep limping around, and then the limp slowly goes away. But here's the thing with, keep in mind, I'm coming from a strength standpoint, not so much a bodybuilding. So my nutrition knowledge, while I have a degree in that, it isn't, where everybody else's is. I'm always been under the impression if I'm in a calorie surplus, in other words, I'm not dieting to try to lose fat or to lose weight, I should pretty much be covering all my nutritional vitamin needs, and mineral needs, with the exception of maybe vitamin D, depending upon where you live, and some essential fatty acids because people don't eat fucking fish. Everything else is pretty much covered. So what exactly is supplementing something that's already taken care of going to help? That's what I never understood with that. It's like you can go and use an Epsom salt bath, and immediately know a difference, from that. Or float, and with the float, you're floating in magnesium, so there's, that as well. But you are right. Most people want to try to, here's a recovery supplement, take this. And I do think intra-nutrition can help if somebody's starting to run against that wall. But that could be as simple as just drinking a Coke or a Mountain Dew while you train. Just getting sugars, glycogen into the muscle. It's probably not the best option, but,
when I used to power lift, I would notice, like, if I got glycogen in my system, I would be stronger during my lift. But now, because my goals have changed, I don't do that. I go on my training fasted. What's your opinion about, with powerlifting, the whole glycogen thing, getting glycogen in your system? Is that something that will actually help, or is that? And I can go back to my powerlifting days when I had to make weight specifically. That I would really, really kind of be strict into my weight. Then I'd wait after my weigh-in. Then I would get sugars to try to recover, before I made. But it never seemed to work for me because I was so weak from, the prior day or two that I couldn't really push myself. It was those days where I was actually like not kind of hammering myself the days before. So if I was like 3 pounds over and I had to like bust my ass that day to get under, then I'd kind of go into my meat week anyway. So tell us a little bit about your knowledge on that.
Well, if I'm working with a lifter, I'm going to want them, I call it glycogen full pretty much at all times. Unless they're fighting a weight class, then it becomes a little tricky situation. But most of the times that's not the case. And the reason for that it definitely will help with the training. It will help with the leverages. It will help with, how they feel and how they contract and all the other kind of stuff. It will help there, but I don't think it helps as much as people really think so. Where it really helps, though, is if they do have to cut weight the week before meet. If they're super glycogen loaded, that means they got a lot of fluid in the muscle, and they're probably got fluid, between the muscle and, other areas. It's a lot easier for them to drop water when they have it than it is when they don't. You see what I'm saying? So it makes for a far easier weight cut if they're thinking about that 10 weeks out. You know, most of the time, you know, they're not. So they go into the last week and they're 5 pounds over and they go to cut and it's a pain in the ass to cut and they feel like shit when it shouldn't have been anywhere near that hard. But from a nutritional standpoint, you know, if it's pre-workout, or I think pre-workouts are fucking stupid, so that's a whole nother topic. But if it's the pre-workout meal, whatever works. I know some people that eat huge breakfasts and they go train. I know other people that if they did that, they throw up. I think everybody who's been training for a year, maybe even less, seriously, they know, you know, I can't train on a full stomach, or I need a little bit of food in my stomach. And this is where nutritional gurus drive me fucking crazy sometimes. Like, if you've been, how long have you been training? 10 years, 5 years?
I've been training for 20 years.
How many years?
I've been like 25 years.
Okay, you've been training 25 years. Yeah. You fucking know if you can have food in your stomach before you train or after you train. But
if I'm going to run like a 5K and I put food in my stomach, it's coming back up for sure.
Yeah, okay.
But if I do a lightweight training session, I can probably handle.
Yeah, you have more experience training your body than anybody else, right? But I guarantee if you hire, you know, half the nutritional gurus out there, they're going to tell you, you know, something that you know is completely fucking not right because you've done it, but then they won't listen to you. That's where the issue is, you know. So I think that, you know, as lifters mature, they need to learn how to become a little bit more, I call it audible ready. You know, they need to be able to listen to themselves a little bit and then question whoever they're consulting with and working with to be able to come up with the best answer, because I have biases towards training. There's no doubt about that. I've been doing this my whole life. I've been coaching other lifters and helping them my whole life. But I have to realize that that bias can be very limiting to who I'm working with. So before I'm going to help somebody, I'm going to have a long conversation with them about what's worked and what's not worked. You know, because if 60%, let's say 60% they already have figured out, fuck, all I have to do is help them figure out the 40% they don't know. You know, that's coaching. You know, what's not coaching is taking somebody that's got 20 years experience and saying, here, do this. And all you had was a fucking questionnaire that was very general. To me, that's detraining. You know, that's going to run somebody backwards or get them hurt.
Dave, we're already at an hour here.
Yeah.
I do want to touch on one more topic because I got a lot of listener DMs about it. Mm-hmm. Supplements. And lots and lots of people who said, ask Dave about creatine, ask Dave about pre-workouts, ask Dave about intra-workouts, ask Dave about whey protein shakes. What are your thoughts on supplements as a whole? Are there a couple you recommend, a couple that you think are total junk? What are your thoughts?
I think if you're in a calorie deficit, then you need to look at what should be supplemented, you know, because that's not in your diet. So that could be vitamins, minerals, and so forth. Does creatine work? Yes. Has it stood the test of time? Kinda. You know, if it was really the cat's ass, every lifter you know that is a big time lifter or a high intermediate lifter would be taking creatine. And across the board, we all know that's false. So is it worth the price, even though it's fairly cheap? Probably not. Why? Open your eyes. You know, there's clues all around. Intra workouts, I think, can make a difference if you're in a calorie deficit, because it will help you recover because of the glycogen that you're losing while you're training. Pre-workouts, I think, are junk across the board. I think that pre-workouts, it's just a stimulant. And here's the thing, and Justin Harris and I did a video on YouTube just specifically about this in the chemical aspect and all this other stuff. But if every training session you have to rely on something to get you amped up, again, like the recovery modalities, that's going to cease to stop working over a period of time. And you don't have to be amped up for the whole entire fucking session, every set, every rep. You know, training doesn't work that way. So let's say you're a power lifter, right? And there might be 1, 2, maybe 4 sets throughout that one training day that really, really matter. I mean, that's the 80%, or that's the 20% and the 80-20 rule. They still got to do all the other shit, but those 4 sets really matter. Those 4 sets, when you actually time the time under tension to do all 4 of them, it's probably under fucking 2.5 minutes. So if I have somebody say I have to use a pre-workout, I'll throw back in their face. So what you're telling me is you can't fucking focus for 2.5 minutes out of an hour and a half. Seriously, you're mentally that fucking weak that you can't pull your shit together for 15, 20 seconds to do one fucking lift.
Heaven forbid, they don't have a Monster or a Red Bull or coffee or something before they lift, because that can. I've had probably a pre-workout 5 times in my entire life, and it made me sick every time. So
yeah, I mean,
I don't see what the big deal is. Just get some music, some good music you like, and go work out. I mean, I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
Yeah, I don't. Well, it's the marketing, it's the hype, it's a lot of other stuff that's kind of in there. And if some people need it, if they're tired because they work all day and it's going to help a little bit, that's fine. Whatever, but it doesn't have to be, it can be a cup of coffee. It can be, one Monster drink. It doesn't have to be fucking 1,000 milligrams of caffeine. Like, you fucking serious? To me, it's just a trend, that 15 years from now, nobody's going to be taking pre-workouts. It's like NO2 from years ago. How many people are taking that shit now? Fucking nobody. So the things that last the period, that last time from a supplement standpoint, are probably the things that people want to look into. So when we look at those things, what are they? Fish oils. They've stood the test of time. Vitamin D, that stood the test of time. Both multivitamin and multi-mineral, that's kind of stood the test of time. Protein shakes, they've kind of stood the test of time. But again, that's a supplement. So that's for the people that can't get the protein through food. I still think they're better off getting it through food. And I don't think anybody disagrees with that. So if you need to get 200 grams of protein, but your schedule only allows, 150 grams because of work or whatever it is, then supplement the other 50 grams with a shake. What shake to take? I've been drinking that stupid shit forever. Some of it makes me shit, some of it don't. So if I need to use a protein shake, I'm going to take the one that doesn't fuck my stomach up and make me want to shit. And as odd as it is, that for me, when I was dieting, Muscle Milk was the only one that didn't give me problems, which happened to be the one that gave everybody else problems. So I think it's that, if somebody's in that position, I typically tell them, don't ever buy the biggest container, buy the smallest one that you can find, see how your body deals with it. And if you're shitting it out 5 minutes after you drink it, you probably don't want to take it, and then find something else, But I would probably do a shake over a bar. The bars, you're going to start getting into more chemicals and shit like that.
Dave, there's so much good information in this podcast. I really appreciate you doing it. For our listeners, how can they learn more about Elite FTS, about yourself? What are your Instagram? What's your website? Things like that.
The website is elitefts.com. The Instagram is at Under the Bar. I am on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. Instagram's where I put most of the focus, and most of my time on Instagram is actually spent answering DMs. I will answer every single DM, even if it's a hater, and I got to reply back just with something like so. I reply to every DM. I do not reply to Messenger. I don't reply to a lot of that's really the Twitter. I don't, because they're too spammed up at this point. So, after being on the platforms for so long, you guys may have the same issue. It's a train wreck, where right now Instagram's still pretty clean. I get some fucked up DMs every now and again. I get somebody that wants to sell me weightlifting belts from China, but it's not the whole thing. So if they want to get a hold of me personally, that is the easiest way. I do my own social media. I don't have somebody else that does that, at least the Instagram. And then the website, I got a blog that is kind of the hub for all the content I put out. So if I do write, and most of the stuff I put on Instagram is more micro blogging, than anything else. So even all those end up being repurposed or are repurposed from my own blog, which is on the website.
For our listeners, I will have all those social media links in the Elite FTS website in the show notes. You can just click the show notes and check those out. For your host, Trevor Kouritzin, for my co-host, Steve Smee, and for our special guest, Dave Tate, founder of Elite FTS, this has been another episode of Evolutionary Radio. Live your life, look good doing it. Thanks for listening.
All right, guys.